group, so we probably won't be here too long if I can answer all your questions. I apologize, I'm going to be speaking a little bit slower. I'm battling a migraine, so they choose when to come and when not to come, so just we'll work through it. I've met a lot of you, but some of you might not know I'm Leslie Duncan, County Commissioner. I was sworn in a little over 2 years ago. I'm in the middle of my 4-year term, so I will be up for election next May in the even year primary. I've really enjoyed my job here. It was something that I kind of prepared for a few years, and I really feel suited to it, and I enjoy it quite a bit. It's definitely challenging, and this is one of the more challenging things that I am dealing with currently, or that the board as a whole is dealing with currently. It's one of the biggest projects that any board, might be the biggest project that any board has faced, come to think of it. So yeah, we'll just go ahead and get started. I want to start with our need. When I got sworn in a couple years ago, I had some analysis done, and our growth at that time was estimated about 3%. So this might have been like 2018 era, but our justice systems, our population growth around 3%, but our justice system growth was around 6%. So the number of arrests, the number of court cases were higher than our population. Now, typically our population coming in has been retired age. That's mostly what we get, a very high demographic. So it's obviously not the new citizens coming in who are causing the rise in cases. We do have quite an extensive population from Spokane that visit us, and that at one point was 30% of our jail population. So, and I want to make some introductions actually right now. So we have over here our treasurer, Steve Matheson. He's our elected treasurer. And we have our deputy clerk, Jennifer Locke, back there. And then we have our juvenile detention director, JT Taylor, right over there. So now that I'm talking about population, JT, can I put you on the spot? Do you get a lot of juveniles from out of state? Out of state. Okay. So essentially what JT indicated is, yes, the juvenile system does have a population of out-of-state residents, I guess you would call them at this point. And so that is one of the stresses, I guess. So not only our growing population, but having that influx of Washingtonians, especially now with some of their drug laws or lack of drug laws. So they're coming over to the border to go shopping, to go to dinner, whatever, and then they're getting caught here, you know, with our laws obviously not matching up. So that's a big strain on our system that our property taxpayers have to pay for. Washingtonians are not paying for this population to be processed through the justice system. So right now we have a very fractured campus, not just administrative services, but our court system. We have the Kootenai County Courthouse, we have the Justice Center, we have a Juvenile Justice Center, which is the old federal building down on 4th. It's a really pretty building that the county purchased for $1. Well, you know, after $1 million later and still counting, you know, nothing's for free. So it's a beautiful building, but the rehab is constant. And I think coming forward, we have at least $200,000 in repairs coming pretty quick. We have a county annex building, and that's the old pizza place that's in our parking lot. The jail, of course. And then we have now some of our people at felony probation and parole. They were nice enough to share office space, because when the Supreme Court and the legislature funded 2 new magistrate positions for Kootenai County, we literally had no space. So we actually had to relocate a whole division, our specialty court division, outside of our old courthouse, and our judges now are in extremely modest offices, and they each came with support staff as well. So that, even though the state funds the judges, Kootenai County taxpayers have to pay to house them, pay for court space, and additional personnel. So about $170,000 Kootenai County taxpayers pay for those judges, even though the judges' salaries are handled by the state. And at any time, if you have a question, just go ahead and, yes, sir? You say house them, you're talking about in their offices or in their residences? In their offices. So the gentleman asked when I talk about housing, it's in their offices, not their homes. So just like normal people, they have to go out and buy a house and live there. So that poses a problem to have our court system so fractured, because we have clerks that have to go in between buildings. We have prosecutor and our public defender also. It's a big scheduling issue as well. So I want to talk about, we have 9 magistrate judges with full-time offices here, and we have 4 sitting district judges with full-time offices here. Then we have 2 visiting district judges. And so let me do the math here. We end up having 16 judges that are using our courtrooms, with 13 having full-time offices. We have 14 courtrooms altogether, although one I understand is a converted closet, like literally. That's what it is. And that's mainly used for appearances by electronic, I wouldn't call it Zoom because you use some other kind of thing. And then we actually have our trial court administrator here, sorry, Carlene, that who's here to back me up and answer questions when I misstate things. So courtrooms 1 through 5 are in the old courthouse, and courtrooms 6 through 11 are in the Justice Building, so that's here on campus. Then courtroom 12 is at the jail. Courtrooms 13 and 14 are at the Juvenile Justice Center right down the street. So in asking for statements from our different aspects of our court system, what I found is an overarching theme about wanting to be located in one spot. So that's something that I really wasn't expecting. I didn't understand that the court facilities being fractured really caused, I guess, more of an issue than I realized in the past. So I want to talk a little bit about the public defender who is out of space. In 2015, the public defender's office was moved to its current location on Lincoln Way. It's probably the one department in Kootenai County who's moved the most, and I don't even have all of the places it was. It was definitely at the annex here on property at one point, but they've been displaced more than anybody else. So at this point, 2015, they had 35 people, so they got a fairly decent rental on Lincoln Way, office space. And now, though, we have 59 people. The reason for that is there is a court case filed by the ACLU against essentially the state of Idaho for not providing proper indigent defense because of caseloads. So they looked at caseloads across the state and said, okay, there's standards. We're going to put in place standards, and now we're going to fund more public defenders so you can meet those standards. So once again, this is something that the state is telling us, the county, that we have to do. They did pay for the additional public defenders, but they're not paying for the space. They're not paying for maybe a little bit of the equipment I think they pay for. But for the most part, Kootenai County taxpayers have to now provide extra space for these 13 bodies. So the 8 defenders came with 5 support staff. So they are also operating out of closets, and they are tucked in. They were actually offered one more position because of caseloads last year, but we had to decline it. We had to say, well, we literally have no space. So that is another pressure. The other thing too is our district court staff, there's 53 members on one floor sharing a 2-person employee bathroom. So it's not just office space and seats, it's facilities too. And I would say the majority, if not all of them, are women. So that really causes an issue when you have that many people sharing that little of a bathroom. So with all that said, this has been a long time coming. This did not happen overnight, but it is a very big project to take on for any set of commissioners because it's a huge expense. Selling a bond to the public is near impossible in Kootenai County. I'm kind of excited to see how the fire department bond is going to do in May, because that may give us an indication of people understanding where we're at with the growth. And for me, I mean, I live out in the boonies, so if I don't already have a fire extinguisher, a hose, and kids who are trained in CPR, I mean, I'm already at a deficit. So the fact that city folk are getting response times 3 to 5 minutes is fantastic. And in order to keep up those response times, that's what this bond is for. It's to be able to build the infrastructure to have the continued response times. I actually don't remember. 14.9 million over 20 years? Is that 10 years? Okay, great, thank you. So that's kind of where we're at. The caseloads, since I kind of skipped over that with the public defender, because I found these numbers to be fascinating. From April 15th, 2020 to March 29th, 2021, the public defender was appointed 4,523 cases. Of those 4,500 cases, 342 were conflicted out of the office to conflict attorneys. Essentially, what that means is, like, if Madison and I are, traveling in the car or whatever, and we get pulled over, and there's red lipstick in there, and red lipstick's, out of there's a law against it, then she's saying, well, it's yours, and I'm saying, well, it's hers. So the public defender cannot represent both of us, so one has to be conflicted out to a contract attorney. Usually a private attorney that handles so much caseload in a rotating basis from the public defender office, or spouses. If you have an issue with spouses, they also both can't be represented by the public defender, so they have to be conflicted out. I was asked last week about the cost. So why have an institutional public defender office? Because that's 60 people that the county taxpayers have to have a place for. Well, if we conflicted everything out, it'd cost about $2 million more. The county would be on the hook for $2 million additional. As it is right now, I think it's about $5 million, including grants and all that. So it would be quite a cost increase to our citizens. So it is beneficial to have them in-house where we have more oversight, because we're paying for it, so we might as well have oversight on it. And right now we have a very good public defender who runs a tight ship, and so I'm very happy to say that. And I know people have negative ideas about public defenders, but honestly, in America, we want to make sure that we have a balance. We want to make sure that no innocent person goes to jail, and we want to make sure that the bad guys definitely go to jail. So without that combination of being able to provide good indigent defense and good prosecution, which, by the way, county taxpayers pay for both. That's always been upsetting to me as a taxpayer. It's like, wait a minute, I pay to prosecute and I pay to defend? Yes, you do. So, but it's important to keep our justice system very well run and very well supported, because to me, that affects your quality of life more than anything else. If you don't have sufficient law enforcement, you can have all the laws in the world and it won't matter. If you don't have sufficient court space, then you're going to be waiting. I always look at it kind of this way. If you're a victim of a crime, how long do you want to wait before that perpetrator is put away. Do you want to wait a couple years because there's no court space and that's how backed up things are? Or worse, what if a family member is wrongly accused? Do you want that person spending a year in jail before they get their trial? So it's very important, and it's about, it fluctuates a little bit, but 65 to 68% of the county budget is justice related. So prosecutor, public defender, courts, and sheriff's department. So all that together, that's a big chunk of what you pay for. And that's how we want it to be, because other services that are not mandated, we want the public to handle those. We want to go to private entities where you can't go to private entities to hear a court case. Mediation you can, which is another good thing that's been happening since COVID. But it's really important, and me coming from justice background, I was everything from a records clerk all the way to a criminal investigator and a reserve officer down in California. So I really, it's really important to me to make sure that we do focus on the justice system here. Because like I said, I believe it's one of the highest predictors of quality of life. And I do not have those statistics, and I'm not sure. Carlene, does your office handle any of that? Okay. Okay. Go ahead. Yes.
What's the long-term plan here? Where is the 10 or 20-year plan that says, here's how we get on the path, and here's what we expect the growth, not only in our, I've been here over 20 years, and the DMV is still right there.
Right.
And the only difference is, the first time I went there, I was in there for 10 or 15 minutes, and I came out with a smile.
Yes.
So, and my property taxes haven't gone down.
Right.
So, the question is, this is administrative purchasing. Judicial portion seems to be symptomatic of a larger problem, which is where is the big plan? What do we do with county facilities in general? And take a quick sidetrack. I know that when I was on the school board, we had the same problem in smaller scale that the county has. This district had administrative offices scattered all over the place. Huge inefficiencies, huge pain in the backside. Give me a migraine every day, right? And we consolidated them into a building that's here on the corner of Ironwood and Northwest. And that was the smartest thing we ever did. And the costs associated with that were nothing compared to the ongoing costs. So,
Right.
I'm sorry, I went a little far afield.
Right.
Get back to my question. Where's the big plan so that you can say, here's the components that we need to fix this problem, but it's part of a larger solution that's going to carry us through the next decade?
That is an unbelievably great question, because, and the question essentially is, where's the long-term plan? Okay, so if we're saying we need a building right now, where's the long-term plan? The architects have told me that the day we open the door to move in, we will already have outgrown it. So it's about 3 years down the road. And this is not a conversation that has been brought up yet with the board. I've been kind of I'm kind of the liaison between the architect and stuff. And so we, yeah, it's a matter of funding. So what we started out to do was try to fund the biggest building we could, and it ended up being a $20 million building. And I don't want to spend too much time on the direct finances, because I want to spend more time on the fact that this is a need. This is not something that's going away. It's something that has been pushed down the road. We have a company doing a long-term look right now, that if this building goes up between these two buildings, a new courthouse, that where other space will be opened up. But that's kind of down the road a little bit, because I can't support building a building that's going to be too small the day we open the door. So I think we need to have a larger conversation as a community to figure out what that long-term, long-range plan is. We are definitely out of space, but I don't want to do this $20 million building that I think that if we do move campus, that we'll never get taxpayer dollars out of that. We'll never get that kind of money out of it. So I think that there's a bigger conversation that needs to be had. What are our other options besides, you know, building this building right here for this size, because we're limited by being between the two buildings, limited on several factors. And I think that we just have to start having that conversation, and it may put us behind a year, but I have to do things right. I can't do things just to Band-Aid it or just to fix it temporarily, which I can already tell you it's not going to be a temporary fix. We're already going to need a second building. So that's something that I do want to continue to talk about. Sir? Oh, sorry. There's a guy behind.
Can you quantify the backlog of cases? The backlog of the courtrooms?
So because of COVID, we did get backlogged. However, there were a lot of things that were still happening, just not jury trials. So I'll let Carlene answer the jury trial thing. But what the good thing that happened was mediation. Like there has been more mediation, more cases settled, so they're not going to trial. So that, I think, from COVID, I hope we continue to carry, because that just benefits everybody to have a person on jury trial. They don't have a say. It's in the jury's hands. But if this person enters into mediation, especially with the victim and everybody involved, then it is a better outcome, I think. And then we had 3 murder charges go to Alford, which means, and I still don't know if I'm saying that right, they are not going to trial. They did not admit guilt, but what they said is, there's so much evidence against me that I believe that it would be a better outcome if I just essentially pled no contest. I mean, that's what it was in California. So, Carlene, do you want to speak to some of the things?
Jury trials suspended, and every time we thought we were going forward, they were suspended again. So we were supposed to start up in October, and that was very short-lived. So we started in January. Right now, we're doing criminal jury trials up at the fairgrounds. Because of the lack of courtroom space, there was no way that we would be able to get everybody in safely in the courtrooms. Even though Kootenai County is no longer under a mask mandate, the court buildings are still under a mask mandate. So anybody that enters the court building or works in the court building has to wear a mask. So we also had to keep everybody 6 feet apart. These courtrooms are just too small for that. So we decided to reach out to the fairgrounds to see if we could get a building to host the jury selections at the fairgrounds, and that's worked out wonderfully. All of the judges, all of the district judges are picking juries out there now. The magistrate judges are picking juries because their juries are smaller. The district judge juries are, 12-member juries with 2 alternates. The magistrates have 8 with 2 alternates. So they require less space. So yeah, we're backlogged, and we're using retired judges to help us. We're doing mediations. Commissioner Duncan mentioned the Supreme Court had every single judge in the state, gave them the opportunity to become a certified mediator so they could mediate cases and try to resolve them that way. So even though COVID was, it hit us hard, we were still doing things by Zoom. The Supreme Court gave us a bunch of all-in-one monitors, so members of the public could use those instead of going into the courtrooms themselves. So there were a lot of things that kept going, but the jury trials were at a standstill until this past January. It depends if the case is ready to go, and that's another thing. Sometimes they decide to plead guilty. Sometimes they want to go forward. I can say that when we were finally allowed to have jury trials in Kootenai County, there were a number of very complicated cases that moved forward that we had taken care of already. But it's a constant flow for jury trials, so it's going to take us a while. I would say a couple of years to get back on track. And we're just doing felony jury trials now. We haven't even started the civil portion of cases. So there's also civil jury trials that are coming down the pike also.
So you mean a couple of years backlog as in having to use these extra facilities like at the fairgrounds?
Correct.
So you don't have to do this for a couple of years.
Correct. In the beginning, I met with the director of the fairgrounds, and we talked about having an agreement to the end of this May. I just contacted her again and pushed it out to December. And it's a lot of work. You have to have room for like a makeshift judges' chambers, room for attorneys, room for the attorneys to meet with the judges and parties. We also had to construct jail cells in a separate building, so if anyone was in custody, they would have a place to stay. The fairground staff have been amazing helping us with this, but we typically select on Monday and Fridays because that works with the judges' schedules. And then sometimes we're unable to use them because another organization or maybe the health department using it for vaccinations.
So do you have any sort of numbers specifically around like how many pre-COVID, what caseload was and how quickly you could get through them versus now?
It's hard to quantify because of certain cases. Again, they could be settled, they could be continued, or they could move forward. The Supreme Court's research department runs all of our numbers. So
Those were cases given to the public defender. So the prosecutor has way more than that because of the private defenders. And those are criminal. Well,
Is there someone we could go to get those numbers?
yes.
I can certainly try to pull them for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can get in touch with our research department and pull them.
Pre-COVID, what the rate was, and the best way.
Sure.
So, right. So tying into that, I want to talk pre-COVID because COVID's an anomaly, and I'm praying that we get back to life semi-normal eventually. What COVID has done is allowed some type of electronic appearance. Well, hearing from judges personally, that when a judge wants to sentence someone, they want to look them in the eye. They don't want to do it over the screen. And then we've had some people in their pajamas, on their bed, a Bud Light in the corner, smoking, all these different things that when someone who's accused of a crime comes to a courthouse and they are dressed a certain way and they are coming to this building, it means a lot more to them than just sitting in their bedroom and being on a phone call with a judge. So I think that if as a society we are really wanting to make sure that these people learn their lesson, that they don't go out and recommit, that they take this seriously, it cannot be done from their bedroom with a Bud Light off camera. So I am very much in favor of making sure that we have sufficient courtroom to not have backlogs, to get through things, and to make sure that our justice system is truly supporting our community and not just limping along. And I was very impressed with the fact that, you know, a judge had told me being in person, it means so much more to the way they want to affect lives and the way that they want to run things. And so I think that's really important that we've got some good judges in Kootenai County that really take their job seriously and don't want to just run them through and appear by Zoom or electronically. So I think that increases the, you know, need for sufficient court space. Alan?
Since the PhD has eliminated the mask mandate, could we eliminate the masks now in the courthouses so the judge can see the face of the people?
So that's a good question. The Supreme Court actually is the guiding factor on our courts. So the Supreme Court has maintained their mask mandate. Carlene had spoke to that a little bit before you got here. So no, commissioners or health districts have no control over what happens in a courtroom. It's almost like, it is. It's a separate branch of government. So they control it. Even though county taxpayers pay for it, the Supreme Court controls the way things happen there.
And I can just also add that we did have plexiglass installed around the witness chairs and around the judge's bench and where the attorneys sit. So there are certain situations where judges are allowing the witnesses, after they've been sworn in, to take their mask down and speak. And also, just a second, in terms of the jury trials and things of that nature, and just any case in general, we've really learned that using Zoom and other platforms has really slowed things down. Just because of the nature of the beast, you know, and everybody had a learning curve in the beginning. You know, people are on mute, they're not on mute. You know, people are trying to talk to their client and they didn't mute it, so, or the system just goes down, or they don't have the video on, and so that's been quite a challenge. But one of the things that our judges are doing, they're hearing cases and having like a regular court call with the Department of Corrections. So if you're in prison, you will meet with a judge to talk about, you know, maybe a reduction in bond or release or any sort of motion that was brought to the judge. So that also is taking an extra bit of time instead of having that person right in front of you. It's just different.
So the question is there any way to get the Supreme Court to maybe lighten up on those requirements?
You know, it is up to the Supreme Court justice to make that determination. We do have regular meetings, and I know the court meets to discuss that, but I don't think they're quite there yet.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So essentially, that's kind of the backstory on how or why we're at where we're at. Something needs to be done, and that's, yeah.
You're absolutely correct. Justice is one of the fundamental responsibilities of government, right? That's something that we have to take care of. I was a little alarmed when you told me that as soon as this thing is built, we're going to be out of space. It begs the next question, what do we do after that?
Right.
Is there do we have even an idea of what happens? Not a plan?
I don't know, Ed, are you speaking to this?
Right on that when he spoke about it earlier, I thought it appears that the drawings are already being created, and yet they know that it's already going to be short. So why are they not creating plans for what they anticipate down the road instead of?
That is a great question, and it's money and location. So 2 years ago, I asked for this court facility to be located next to the jail out at the fairgrounds. And the board decided 2-1 that it would stay here on campus. If we did move out there, yes, it would be more expensive, and we can talk about some funding options, but we would be able to build what we needed for now and for the future if we had a bigger location to actually build the building.
2 years ago was a much different situation than you're facing now with the growth. Has it been broached, brought up recently?
No.
2 years ago is a little different than now.
Yeah, so the question is, 2 years ago, you know, we're in a whole different situation growth-wise, and has it been brought up? It has not been brought up, because just recently have I come to the realization that this building is going to be woefully short about what we need. So I think that's a great conversation to bring up now. I think the community needs to be involved, because I did my best to pitch that idea, and it didn't go anywhere. 2 years ago. Yeah, 2 years ago. So that would be,
First man on the moon, Neil Armstrong, was asked, if you had 10 seconds to live, what would you do? If you were in a dire situation, 10 seconds. He said, I would think for 9 and act in 1. And this has a feeling here that we're not thinking for 9.
right.
You know, that we're not, we had a comprehensive plan that, you know, people think about. But now they're talking about putting together a commission for an alternate form of government. Where was the commission to consider facilities and what to do there?
Right.
I know that on the central committee, if ever we've got an issue or problem that needs study, we form a little committee, and the guys go off and study, and they come back with a report and tell us what they found out.
Right.
Has that exercise been done in this?
That's a great question. It has not. I think that sometimes with the workload that commissioners are under, that things get pushed along that maybe shouldn't, because the thought hasn't happened. But it's you know, like a system, a machine. Okay, this is in front of us. Okay, let's vote. Okay, this is in front of us. Let's vote. And I think that the need is so great for our county employees that I know that I pushed it ahead as fast as I could, because I want to alleviate that strain, and it takes so long to build buildings. So now that I'm in this process so far, and sometimes you have to get down the road before you realize what street you're on and where you need to make the next turn. So I think that I'm there. I think that with some funding sources that we've potentially identified, I think that we have better options than we did when we started this project. And what I asked to do was, with this architect, I said I want it in 2 phases. I want first phase, just go out and see how you're going to put these people who need the space in a space. So that's where we're at. So I committed, the board committed to $693,000 to get to the point where we're almost at. And then I said, once we get a funding source, then we will know how much bigger the building can be, but we're limited here by that space in between the buildings. So the public defender doesn't even fit on 1 floor. I mean, once we move them in, that's it. They can't grow. And we already know that Public Defense Commission had asked for 1 more body, and so on and so on and so on. So I need if we're going to have this discussion about moving this from campus, I can't do it by myself. I have to have community involvement to say, okay, yes, we think this is a good idea, or no, we don't think this is a good idea. Because that's what it's going to take. I work for you. I'm not here for me. Trust me, I had a beautiful life. That's not beautiful now. It's just a lot more challenging. So, yes. Yes. Okay. Does everybody here know what an urban renewal district is? Familiar? Everybody familiar? Familiar? Not so many. Okay. Essentially, what it is a mechanism to take a blighted area. It's a geographically defined area, and any growth and increment, those taxes are not given to the taxing district. They are put back into infrastructure to improve the area. This is totally simplistic, but it's the best I can give you right now. And actually, Steve can probably answer some questions for me. So when that happens, the county, the other taxing districts don't get the growth value, so it keeps going back in. So everybody else's taxes are paying for additional services for this geographically defined area, but not getting the benefit from it and not getting tax revenue to pay for the services. Now, there are some places here in Kootenai County who've done spectacular jobs. It was really a blighted area. They did it. We have other places that, you know, were disasters and huge public outcry for these things. So when these URDs close, closing means their projects are done. Now they can give the full value tax increment back to the taxing districts. That is what I would like to see used to fund this new building, wherever it ends up being. So at this point, I've heard very differing numbers. So talking to our treasurer, I'm just for discussion's sake, I'm going to use 2.2 million. Okay, let's just say that amount of money is going to come in new value back to the county. Starting next year or the year after, probably next year. Okay, so this coming budget season is what we're going to factor into it. So with that 2.2 million and a borrowing authority, okay, there's two ways we can get borrowing authority. We can use that amount of money, 2.2 million, every single year to pay the debt on the new facility. So it wouldn't be a bond that would appear on your tax deed necessarily, but we have other mechanisms. So I'm getting ahead of myself, I apologize. Typically for a project, a courthouse, you would go to the voters, and 66 2/3 of the voters would need to say, yes, we are going to allow the county to incur debt. Right now, the commissioners cannot incur debt. Everything must be paid off year to year. So the state legislature, I think, was brilliant and said, if you're going to go into debt, you better get voter approval. All right? Now, Kootenai County is not a fan of bonds, so we understand that. But what I could see happening is Kootenai County running a bond for this building as authority to borrow only, not authority to, well, I can't use that word twice, but not an additional amount that comes out of your pocket, because we already have that 2.2 million coming back. I know, it's crazy. So it even gets a little bit more complicated than that, but essentially we have a bond that allows us to, that allows people to let us go into debt. Or we have what's called a certificate of participation or a lease. So we're just going to call it a lease to be a little bit more simple. So let's just take the area at the fairgrounds. So let's say that this board decided to move out there. We would take 4 acres, whatever this building required, and we would go to a bank and we would lease that 4 acres to the bank. The bank would then build the building, all right? And then the county would then lease the building for those spaces. So we would move in, and every year we would make the $2.2 million lease payment until it was paid off. Then everything reverts, the ownership reverts back to the county. If the county should default, this is how we get around the law. If the county should default on that, we've got to move out. So all of our judges, all of our clerks and prosecutors and public defenders, everybody has to move out. Then the bank will then proceed to try to recoup that money they spent on it until it's paid off. Then my understanding is it reverts back to the county. But it's a pretty safe thing for a bank because, number one, they're not going to be able to rent out courthouses very easily, and they know that we have to provide court, so we're not going to default on the loan, if that makes sense. So it's really complicated. I try to simplify things, but it's just complicated. So essentially, we have two ways to incur debt. One is a lease, one is a bond, which is permission from the voters to incur the debt. There's one question back here. Not yet, no, but that's something. Oh, okay. Yes, thank you. So that's why we would get this increment, is because there are several URDs ending this year, which means the project is complete, and now they will no longer be funneling that valued increment back into the project. It's now going to go to the taxing district. So the two are Post Falls closures, two districts in Post Falls. Okay, so 3 or 4 closures coming up. Okay, so the 2 that would be closing this in 22 essentially would be what we would be able to use to fund any debt service that we went into. Yes. Correct.
So right now, we have these URDs, when the URDs are active, a portion of the property tax is diverted from the county into the URD, and they spend it.
Yes.
Those are the big smart bucket, right? They spend it.
Yes.
When those close, and that revenue, instead of going in that direction, it comes into the county, but it comes in just as it would any other tax revenue in budgets. And so it would either go to reduce everybody's property tax through the levy system,
Yes.
or it would be diverted to pay the interest on this loan.
Yep.
Building. Now, the second thing you mentioned, which was lease back, bank buy,
Yes.
that sounds damn expensive, because we've got a bank who's making their big on the whole situation. And we're still paying for it. It's
Right.
just avoiding the vote,
Yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So it goes, the money that's going to that is coming out of the budget, we gotta pay the budget. That goes into the levy rates, and it shows up as a higher property tax. So, it all gets back down to what's the highest and best use of our taxpayer dollars to get the most value.
Yes.
And that's the argument I would like to hear
Right.
commissioners make, is that, yes, we gotta take this to a vote, and yes, we need a 66%, but the other option that we're forced to do by law is gonna cost you more money. I mean, is that a fair?
So the lease and the bond are actually very similar in interest rates. The lease is a little bit more complicated, so there's more work and more cost up front. But when you're talking about a $20 million project here, or I'm just throwing this number out there, so don't everybody freak out, a $50 million project at the fairgrounds, which would last us pretty much forever, I mean, at least 40 or more years, it would be negligible on that size of a project. So I don't know if Steve wants to.
What's the bond rate now? What is it, 2%, 3%?
Depending on the term, the maturity. What I want to do is, I can go into some of these details, but I think we're losing track of the more germane issue. And that is, do we need a justice facility? How big is it? And where are we gonna put it? The funding mechanism, I can go ahead and talk about, but to me, it's,
support $40 or $50 million bond. Is that a fair statement, or is that?
That is a fair statement. At $3 million, we can afford the $55 million if we go on a 30-year interest.
So the idea that there's enough money to do it right as opposed to put a new roof on a building that has a bad foundation,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
So, my advice to the county commissioners is that people in Kootenai County aren't stupid. They recognize a good deal and they recognize a bad deal. And, I know that, my personal experience just a week ago, when Chief Ray brought, or Chief Wayne brought the bond, the levy for the fire and rescue to the central committee, I thought, oh boy, here we go, more taxes. And because it was a well laid out plan with the future and it made sense and you could articulate it reasonably, intelligently, and showed how it would roll out in the future, it was almost unanimously accepted on the spot.
Yep.
So, I would encourage you and the board to, have a plan that isn't just we're gonna put a Band-Aid on it and come back in 3 years and have to, replace the limb.
Right, right. Yeah. Well, and like I said, I have to get so far down the road before sometimes I can see these things. And my issue is focused on taxing authority, taxes being curtailed by the legislature. They were looking at taking 50% of the URD value and not giving it to the taxing authorities. They were looking at taking that, only allowing 75% of new growth to come forward to pay. I mean, new growth is supposed to pay for itself, but if the legislature's saying you cannot use that money, then I have to tax, I have to raise your taxes. And yes, because, well, I'm going to be political here. I'm not going to be political, I should say, because people in the state of Idaho are complaining that their taxes are too high. Their property taxes are too high. And I don't disagree, but I would come at it at a different way because the valuations in homes have gone up so much that ag and commercial are much lower. But the legislature doesn't want to look at that balance because they are pro-business. So it's a shift that's been happening for I don't know how many, I mean, minimum 5 years, okay? So where it used to be, it's kind of like this now, but they are looking at, well, and they're looking at spending. They keep saying over and over again, it's a spending issue. Counties need to spend less money. Taxing districts need to spend less money. Okay, please tell me, what service would you like to not do without, okay? 15 minutes of DMV. When we lived here and we took in, I mean, this is how many vehicles we have. And nowadays, it's 45 days out by appointment, okay? What do you want to pay for? Because if you want same-day service, then I need to hire 6 more people, and I need to go get another building, and I need to do all these things to provide that service. So what do citizens want? Do they want to wait 45 days for their license plate, or do they want same-day service? It's a zero-sum game almost. It's like you want this service, you want this much money. It was starting to get bad before COVID. Yes, COVID did not help things, but it was also a state system that hurt the DMV. And it was also the fact that we have no houses on the market. I mean, the inventory is so incredibly low. Where did all those houses go? They've all been bought up. Okay, you've got people getting offered $100,000 more for their house that wasn't even for sale, and in cash. So it's one of those things where the influx, you talk about planning ahead, nobody could have planned ahead for this. Nobody could have said, okay, well, we're going to have COVID, and then, everybody's going to love Kootenai County for what they offer and, have this incredible influx. You couldn't. Even Hutter Bypass, they were talking about the timing and the 5-year plan and all this kind of stuff. Well, everything's moved up because our growth has outpaced the predictions. Yes.
and figure out how to pay for it. Now, I think you made a strong case that we need more justice capability. Right? We need more square footage for that whole operation. And you made the distressing case that as soon as we do that, we're going to be out of space again.
Yep.
We're going to have to do this again. And so I would say that one of Mr. Mattison's questions goes, what's the 10-year plan? What's the 20-year plan? How do you even formulate that?
So that, yeah, that's a difficult question. And once this study comes back for long-range options, then I think we can have that discussion with the full board. Russ, did you have a question?
Two or three real simple, couple of them just answered them.
Okay.
But I gotta ask, being a resident of Kootenai County all my life, what is so sacred about this little island called the campus? What, I don't understand it. I've heard this from commissioners down the line years ago. I can remember as far back as John Denver. Maybe I can, who's quite sure. All I'm getting at is just always, well, we want to keep stuff off campus. Well, let me ask you, I don't care how little or big a building you build on campus, when it's ready to move into, will it house everybody in the justice system?
No,
I don't think it will.
it won't. We don't have enough space. We could go 10 stories and it would still be, yeah.
My question is also this, is do you believe those two other commissioners may now, seeing what's happened in the last couple of years, reconsider their vote and maybe consider doing that is a possibility, or are they just hung up on this, we gotta keep it on campus? What are you gonna do, build a 14-story building?
Yeah, I can't even answer that question.
Also, I
I'm,
wanted to ask if the, when this was mandated by the county to take on a couple more judges and staffs and everything, compiled into a lot of space, doesn't the state give county anything for that?
yes, there is a district court fund that carpet, some repairs and things like that. And it's, I don't know if I'd call it substantial because was it 400,000 right now, Carlene? Yeah. So the short answer is for little things, yes. The long answer is no. However, since the federal government insists on printing dollars and insists on trying to give them out, we may be looking at some additional funding coming towards facilities. But at this point, it's way too early to tell.
And the judges' salaries are paid by the state of Idaho, as the court reporters are, and all of the computer equipment, electronic equipment, that's all provided by the state of Idaho. But the offices are provided by the feds.
Nancy, did you say there was a question?
There's a question online, Commissioner. It says, the first one was, if the commissioners are given taxpayer permission to put the county into debt by a bond, can they still claim their 3% foregone taxes too?
Right now today, yes. So right now today, we would, if a bond passed, and let's say that we didn't have a funding mechanism to back that up, all right? According to calculations that change constantly, at a point in time, I think a month or two, actually it was the beginning of this month, it was said to be, to pay for this bond, it would be $4.44 per 100,000 in value. So the Duncans in their modest home would literally be paying less than $10 a year for that $120 million bond, okay? So let's say that everything was happy and that was what happened. Then yes, we still have $10.9 million in foregone taxing authority. So it's money that previous commissioners or taxing authority that they did not take. So by law, we're allowed to raise our property tax portion of our budget 3% every year. So the bond, okay, then the foregone, then the 3%, and new growth. That's all available to us right now. That's why elections matter. Okay, you need to have people who are going to do the right thing with your dollars. Very important. So all that is available right now. Now, in this particular case with the URD's closing, with our new growth, because I think, I want to ask this question. Can anybody in here take a guess about the value of the property in Kootenai County? So 1,200 square miles, how much do you think all that value is? Oh yeah, you don't tell them because you heard this already. No guesses? Not even one? We had a guess of 66 million this morning. $26.9 billion. Yes. Exactly, exactly. Yes, 26.9 billion. So what happens is when that value goes up, then the base spreads out and your taxes can go down. So that is the good news. The bad news is with that continual shift, with the valuations of our homes going up. I mean, you know, 5 acres with a manufactured home in Athol is over $400,000 now. Yeah. Right, correct. So when that happens, now you're paying on that elevated value, whereas the other ones that are not being elevated are not paying as much tax. It's a huge tax shift, which is why I argue with the legislature, cutting our funding is not going to help people's property tax. Do something about the valuation. 5-year rolling average. I don't know. I don't have that kind of brain to give you a solution, but I definitely know that cutting our taxing ability is going to cut services. So I'm okay with that. I'm all right with lower government. How long do you want to wait for a court appearance? How long do you want to wait in line for the motor vehicle licensing? Okay? It's all about if the quality of life that you want, you need these services provided, then it has to be paid for.
But it's a nasty word. But it sounds to me like you're saying basically that growth is outpacing the ability, you can't keep up with it. Infrastructure and all the services and stuff like that. Moratorium until they can catch up.
State law, no. State law doesn't afford it. It's,
It can be shown, I mean, it is almost an emergency situation, really, because I'm hearing that nobody wants to, really, you have people siding up, yes, no, and it's almost paralyzing situation. And it is somewhat of an emergency situation. You hear Chief Way, and you hear Sheriff Norris, and you hear these people saying, Chief Way told me right out this hallway last week. I said, I asked him about impact fee. No, when a subdivision or an annexation or whatever comes in, they're allowed to make a comment only as to whether it meets fire code, not that they don't have the infrastructure or the equipment or whatever to service it, which is a safety issue.
right.
Sheriff Norris said the same thing about how growth is affecting the jails and the future needs for
Right.
assets and people and everything else. And they are unable, the infrastructure is unable to keep up with the growth, so it is almost an emergency situation.
So I look at emergencies a little bit different. I completely understand your side of it. I don't want to get derailed right now about growth. I want to stick to the fact that I have public defenders in closets. I have, you know, judges who aren't able to have enough room in their office to spread out and to really get focused on what they need to be focused on. So though that's my thing for tonight anyway. Sir? I honestly think because that the prosecutor and sheriff are independently elected offices, that they need to have that conversation, and I don't think that it's really a commissioner issue. I would build a wall, but that's just not possible. So I can tell you that the way things are handled is to not overcrowd our jails, to cite and release on most misdemeanor issues. So that is started by previous, administrations, but that has really been a help to keep things down. But yeah, I mean, I would be fine if the public wanted to have that conversation with those entities, but that's not my lane.
Let's go back to stage one then. What do you need to facilitate the next 20 years? What needs to be built right now? How large, how many courts, how many offices? And why are they, why did, I start there. Until the architect said, whoa, 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 this is a waste. Let's figure out what we're gonna need and move from there.
Great question. I am one person. I would have to have another person from the board come alongside and decide to do that. That's why phase one is all I would agree to for the architect. And so we've gotten to a certain point, and none of the architect stuff that's been done is wasted. So I don't want people to think that that's, $700,000 down the toilet. It's not at all. All the work that's been done is still good. But that is a conversation that I think, is going to need to be had.
Agenda, I mean, immediately. This needs to be discussed immediately, as soon as possible, to get the other two commissioners to either to get on the record and say yay or nay, so that when the election does come up, you say, hey, folks, it wasn't 2 years ago we talked about this, this is where we are now, and if they don't recognize it now, then there's an issue.
That is a great question. I'm not in a position right now to put it on an agenda. Long story, dealing with a lot of stuff right now. As things clear up, I think it's a great conversation to have. The other reason why I think that we can wait at least a month is because legislature is still in session. They're going to be coming back on April 6th. So our funding mechanisms are not safe yet. So we need to have the legislature adjourn, which I'm saying the wrong word because they're not actually adjourning. They're just going into recess now so they can be called back into session. So that is one of the reasons why we kind of paced it out in the first place, was to say, okay, we think we can afford a $20 million building, but we won't know until the legislature closes and we know what they've done to our current funding sources. So once they close.
Just have the initial discussion to agree on what's the need, and then
Right. I'm a little bit cart before the horse because I'm so money oriented that I don't know. I mean, if we can't build anything, Saturday court, night court, I don't know where we would go from here. But at this point, I'm okay waiting that month to make sure that we have funding available. Because right.
But as a taxpayer, I'm hearing this said, hey, it's gonna be obsolete when you build, basically. I'm gonna say, I don't care how you fund it. No way, it's a waste.
Right. Well, and here's the other issue too, come to think of it. A bond is only good for a courthouse. We cannot build an office building with a bond. So we build this courthouse with this bond and we still need an office building. I don't know where that money's going to come from because, like I said, it's not big enough. I agree, but not everybody can see the big picture. Yes. No, I totally agree. And I really appreciate everybody coming out and being engaged and involved, because this is your life I'm talking about. This is your money. It's not mine. Well, I mean, it is, but in that kind of scale, your kind of scale is big. So that's why I wanted to have this conversation and kind of say, okay, look, the need exists. The need is real. How do you want to move forward for your quality of life? Yes.
Get the big picture first.
Yep.
Everything you're gonna need to take it 20 years, how much land, where's it gonna be, before you start, it doesn't matter.
Sure. Steve, did you have any comments that you wanted to?
I believe the time horizon is 40 years. The asset that we're placing in, we're talking about financing, is a 40-year asset, I would believe. So the time horizon, I think, is at least 30, if not 40. And the way that my mind works as a financial guy is I look at the different alternatives. What is the net present value cost of building a 40-year asset and funding it? And what is the net present value cost of continuing this dysfunction of segregated facilities elsewhere? Net present value, both of those different cash flow streams. My gut, I haven't done these calculations, my gut tells me that the 40-year new asset, capital asset, constructed somewhere is going to be the cheaper alternative. But that analysis, that comprehensive look, hasn't been done, and it's been an ongoing frustration of mine for the last year. I don't determine facility uses, needs, anything else. I can help the commissioners determine what the different avenues of funding it might be. Some of them are more palatable than others, but that's a decision the commissioners need to make. So those are my comments.
Thank you. Any other questions about the building, about going forward? So for me, I'm willing to take that bigger view and get this long-term study back, which should be back, I would think, in the next month or two, and have that legislature shut down and kind of have that conversation about a broader picture. We are not where we were 2 years ago. We're not. And I'm not sure that I would have run if I would have known COVID was in my future. I might have just been tucked away in my house the whole time. But here we are, and I want to be in this together with the citizens because, like I said, I'm not here for my health. My husband will attest to that. I'm here because I see a need, and I really want us to maintain our quality of life here. And one of them is getting this justice system cohesive, leave the fracture behind, and provide good services for the citizens. Because I'm not sure, I mean, for me, I've only been in court for traffic tickets, but I know that the court system touches different people at different times. I mean, at one time or another, probably everybody has touched the court system, whether it's civilly or criminally. I mean, you know, hopefully you weren't victims. Well, hopefully you weren't perpetrators, actually. So anyway, so it's kind of an important system that I think as a society we have to support. That's a really good question. We opened it up to elected officials, and I said that I wanted to talk about the bond. I wanted to talk about kind of funding options for this need, because in my mind it's a need, but to Treasurer Matheson's point, it's a better conversation to have why we need it and not worry about the funding at this point. But like I said, that's really hard for me to do. So I said that I would come talk about and educate about what a bond means, what it is, and why we would offer a bond on the ballot.
Could something like this be held where the elected officials do kind of an open forum, town hall, whatever you want to call it, this type of situation, where we have this discussion? Again, I use the term, get them on the record.
Mm-hmm.
A month is not, but waiting out, pushing out, we're at that point where we can't fight it anymore.
Right.
Let's get to something needs to be done.
I would be absolutely happy to have the 9 elected officials do a forum and talk about the things that affect all of us, really. And I think that I'm a little bit more involved because building and grounds is one of my liaison departments. So I'm dealing with facilities literally every single day, and I literally touch 44 departments in the county because everybody's got to sit somewhere. Good point. Probably a bigger venue than this.
Yeah, we do our legislative town hall, we host it up to 450 people, and 9 legislators, so having 7 elected officials and that many people.
There's 9 of us. There's 9 of us. I would be all for that and just send out the invitation. So.
One thing I want to mention, guys, as you know, and I think many of you know, this is a commissioner decision. Commissioners hold the authority over the buildings and what we need and what we don't. And I have not participated in a lot of conversations, so I have to defer to their judgment about the need that was described by Leslie. And Leslie is infinitely more familiar with the needs than I think maybe the other 2 commissioners are. That town forum or that meeting that you're describing, you got to make sure all 3 commissioners are there. I'll be happy to talk about the finances and do all that stuff. Leslie's getting a little bit of the heat given to her today because she's trying to, lead. But all 3 commissioners have to be participating, so.
I think all the elected officials that would be included, and again, this is my opinion, that I truly believe that they would all be very concerned and would like to be mindful about the safety and security of everybody that goes in and out of that courthouse, and our court facilities, how we're transporting prisoners in and out, the security of the security parking lot for judges, things like that. Those are things that I think everybody would be very supportive of, because we don't have that right now, and it would be a shame if something horrible happened.
You literally have bailiffs in the snow and ice walking prisoners into buildings.
And the prisoners are passing
Yeah.
judges' chambers.
Yeah.
They're walking past judges' chambers.
Yeah.
There's no separate entry for that.
Sitting in jury boxes waiting for the judge to come in.
I've been to the fair many times, and I'm still trying to process in my head how court is being held there, and people are in jails, and I keep flashing on having them.
Yeah. It's actually they did a very good job. They did a good job. So you should see some pictures.
Our
So
biggest challenge is having the jurors come to our building and that people getting vaccines go to the other buildings. And we get a little mixed up.
yes. Yeah. So I really appreciate everybody coming out tonight. I mean, it's kind of a big ask to, especially on such a beautiful day today, to come and talk about, stuff like this. But thank you.